David Martin found a quiet, profound satisfaction in the emerald tapestry of his front lawn. It wasn't merely grass, it was a statement, a carefully cultivated rebellion against the enforced homogeneity of Willow Creek Preserve. Here, in this affluent enclave, where variations in landscaping were often met with thinly veiled suspicion and uniformity reigned supreme, David's yard stood apart. It was a living canvas, a thoughtful composition blending native grasses that whispered and swayed in the Texas breeze, strategically placed river stones, adding texture and form, drought-tolerant perennials erupting in vibrant, shifting bursts of color throughout the seasons, and elegantly shaped ornamental trees providing structure and grace. It was meticulously maintained, environmentally conscious in its water usage and plant choices, and, to David's discerning eye, genuinely beautiful. To his neighbor directly across the street, however, Margaret Sanderson, it was a persistent, glaring affront, an eyesore, a violation. Margaret, a formidable linchpin of the Willow Creek HOA, serving with iron-fisted zeal on the crucial Architectural Review Committee, functioned as the subdivision's self-appointed, unofficial arbiter of neighborhood aesthetics and social propriety. She viewed David's carefully designed landscape not with admiration, nor even simple indifference, but with an undisguised, simmering hostility. It wasn't just that his yard dared to deviate from the monotonous, chemically dependent green carpets that characterized most surrounding properties. It was fundamentally whose yard it was. David Martin, the county's sitting district attorney, and his wife, Simone, a respected pediatrician, along with their 2 young children, were one of only a handful of Black families residing within the predominantly white, affluent enclave of Willow Creek Preserve. Margaret, known widely throughout the neighborhood, though never, ever directly to her face, by the ubiquitous, weary nickname Karen, possessed a remarkable talent for cloaking her deep-seated, almost visceral prejudices in the seemingly innocuous, objective language of property values, community standards, and aesthetic harmony. Her campaign against the Martins' yard began subtly, insidiously. Initial salvos were fired during HOA meetings, generalized comments, delivered with pursed lips and a sigh, about the pressing need to maintain a consistent tan traditional neighborhood appearance to protect their collective investment. Remarks pointedly delivered while avoiding direct eye contact with David, who occasionally attended. When these broad hints failed to produce the desired effect, David replacing his native grasses with standard street Augustine. Margaret progressed to the next stage, passive-aggressive notes, typed and unsigned, left discreetly in the Martins' oversized mailbox. Notes lamenting unconventional plant choices or suggesting certain less traditional elements might be visually disruptive. David and Simone read these notes, exchanged weary glances, and deposited them directly into the recycling bin, refusing to acknowledge the bait. Their polite refusal to engage, their quiet dignity in the face of her veiled hostility, seemed only to infuriate Margaret further. She grew bolder, abandoning anonymity, escalating to direct, unwelcome confrontations during neighborhood walks or while David was retrieving his mail. David. She'd called out one sun-drenched Saturday morning, interrupting his peaceful moment, listening to birdsong, gesturing towards his yard with a barely concealed sneer twisting her thin lips. While your efforts are certainly noted, I feel compelled to mention that some residents, quite a few, actually, feel your landscaping style is perhaps a bit much. She paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the humid air. It doesn't quite fit the established Willow Creek aesthetic, you understand. It looks rather, well, frankly, it looks rather ethnic. The word hung there, ugly and exposed, stripped bare of its flimsy camouflage of aesthetic concern. David, a man accustomed to navigating far more dangerous, complex confrontations in courtrooms and interrogation rooms, a man skilled in maintaining composure under intense pressure, had simply turned slowly, deliberately, to meet her gaze. His own expression remained carefully, professionally unreadable, revealing nothing of the cold anger coiling within him. "Ethnic, Margaret?" he repeated, his voice quiet, even, almost deceptively mild. "Help me understand. What exactly does that term mean when you apply it to native grasses and flowering perennials?" Margaret had sputtered, flustered, momentarily silenced by the direct, calm challenge. She was unable, or unwilling, to articulate the raw prejudice underpinning her objection without revealing its inherent, undeniable ugliness. She retreated hastily back towards her own perfectly manicured, perfectly conventional lawn, muttering something about inappropriate textures. But her retreat was tactical, not a surrender. Her resentment festered, stoked by David's calm refusal to be intimidated, by his family's quiet confidence, by their simple, undeniable presence in her carefully curated, implicitly white space. She couldn't force him out through social pressure. She couldn't compel him to change his landscaping through official HOA channels. His yard, meticulously designed and maintained, violated no actual written rules or covenants, only her unwritten code of racial and aesthetic exclusion. So, her simmering hatred, denied conventional outlets, curdled. It transformed into something darker, more desperate, more actively malicious. The attack, when it finally came, occurred under the concealing shroud of a moonless, starless night. High-resolution security cameras, installed by David not out of paranoia, but as a standard. Prudent precaution given the inherent risks and visibility associated with his high-profile job as district attorney, captured the entire calculated act with chilling, undeniable clarity. The timestamp indicated shortly after 2 a.m. A figure, clad in dark clothing, emerged furtively from the deep shadows surrounding Margaret Sanderson's house. The figure moved quickly, almost scurrying, across the deserted street, carrying 2 large, opaque plastic jugs, one in each hand. Reaching the edge of David Martin's property, the figure, unmistakably Margaret Sanderson, her face clearly visible in the infrared night vision, began to move swiftly, methodically, along the perimeter of his prize-winning front lawn. She walked with a determined stride, tilting the large jugs, methodically pouring a steady stream of liquid onto the thriving, verdant turf, covering a significant area near the sidewalk and driveway. The infrared camera couldn't capture the color, but the way the liquid splashed and soaked quickly into the dense grass was clearly visible. For a brief moment, the unmistakable, acrid chemical scent of household bleach, potent and corrosive, hung heavy and unnatural in the still night air before dissipating. Her task completed, Margaret straightened up, glanced furtively left and right down the sleeping street, then turned and retreated just as quickly as she had appeared, melting back into the deep shadow surrounding her own perfectly manicured, perfectly conventional, perfectly undamaged yard. The entire malicious act took less than 3 minutes. The following morning, the devastating extent of the damage was immediately, horrifically apparent. Large, ugly, irregular patches of David's beautiful green canvas were already turning a sickly, dying yellow-brown. The vibrant, healthy blades of native grass were scalded, chemically burned, visibly wilting under the corrosive assault. The carefully cultivated emerald perfection was marred, violated, by swaths of ugly chemical burns, a clear, undeniable testament to a deliberate, hateful act of vandalism. Simone discovered it first, stepping out onto the front porch to retrieve the morning newspaper. Her sharp gasp of dismay, a sound of pain and disbelief, brought David running from the kitchen, coffee cup still in hand. Seeing the scorched earth, the blatant, targeted destruction of something they had nurtured with care, David felt a different kind of fury rise within him. Not the controlled, righteous anger harnessed in the courtroom to pursue justice, but something colder, deeper, more personal. This was his home, his family's sanctuary, their private space, deliberately, viciously violated. Violated by an act fueled by pure, unadulterated, racially motivated hatred, thinly disguised as a petty landscaping dispute. The connection was instantaneous, undeniable. "She did it," Simone whispered, her voice trembling, a mixture of profound anger and deep, personal hurt welling in her eyes. "That woman, I know she did it." "Let's check the cameras," David said grimly, his voice tight, his professional calm momentarily deserting him, replaced by the raw instinct of a husband-father whose family had been targeted. The digital video footage was irrefutable, stark, sickening. Margaret Sanderson, plain as day in the clear, infrared recording, methodically poisoning their lawn with bleach under the cover of darkness. They watched short clip twice, the calculated malice evident in her every furtive movement, the sheer hatred driving her actions, leaving them both feeling shaken, vulnerable, and nauseated. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. How much hate did it take to do something like this? David, the district attorney, instinctively knew the precise protocols to follow. The professional side clicked back into place, overlaying the personal hurt. He picked up his personal cell phone and dialed the non-emergency line Fourth Local Police Department. He requested an officer be dispatched to his address to take a vandalism report. He made a conscious, critical decision not to call the police chief directly, not to leverage his title or position for special treatment. This initial report, the foundation of any potential case, needed to proceed through entirely normal channels. It needed to be handled impartially, documented meticulously, without any appearance of undue influence. He simply stated his name, his address, the nature of the crime, vandalism, chemical damage to lawn, and calmly mentioned that he possessed clear video evidence identifying the perpetrator. He offered no further details over the phone. When Officer Kelly arrived approximately 20 minutes later, a young patrolman relatively new to the specific Willow Creek beat, David met him calmly at the front door. He explained the situation concisely, professionally, described the discovery of the damage, and stated his belief, based on video evidence, that his neighbor across the street was responsible. He provided Officer Kelly with a standard USB thumb drive containing a clean, unedited copy of the security footage time-stamped from the previous night. Officer Kelly took the drive, retreated to his patrol car, and watched the footage in his vehicle-mounted laptop computer. David watched from the porch as the officer's posture stiffened, his eyes widening noticeably in disbelief as he viewed the recording. That's Miss S. Margaret Sanderson from right across the street," Officer Kelly stammered, emerging from his car, clearly shocked, looking first at the thumb drive, then at the visible damage on the lawn, then back at David. The pieces clicked into place. He recognized the name, the house, and now the face on the video. Pouring bleach all over your lawn? He looked directly at David, a new awareness dawning in his eyes as he fully registered who he was speaking to, whose house this was. Sir, Mr. Martin. District Attorney Martin. The first. We will take this report very, very seriously, sir. I expect you and your department to handle it strictly by the book. Officer, David replied, his voice even professional, leaving no room for doubt. Interview the suspect based on the evidence provided. Document the scene thoroughly. File your complete report, he added, preempting any potential concerns about conflict. My office will, of course, review the filed report like any other incoming case. However, I will obviously recuse myself personally from any involvement in the charging decision or prosecution. The case will be assigned out, likely to a senior deputy or potentially referred to the state AG's office, to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. While Officer Kelly began the process of documenting the scene, photographing the damage, taking initial measurements, David and Simone made another crucial decision. They shared a copy of the damning footage with their immediate, trusted neighbors on either side, and also contacted Mr. Henderson, the generally decent, though often ineffectual, HOA president, a man frequently steamrolled by Margaret's forceful personality during board meetings. The reaction among those who saw the video was instantaneous, visceral, and furious. Whispers of disbelief quickly turned into open condemnation. Neighbors gathered hesitantly on the sidewalk, staring first at thugly, bleached patches scarring the Martins' beautiful lawn, then turning to gaze with newfound hostility towards Margaret Sanderson's silent, imposing house across the street. Expressions of disgust, outrage, and shame flitted across their faces. Suddenly emboldened, several neighbors began sharing previously unspoken stories, anecdotes of Margaret's past racist comments, snide remarks about other minority families who had since moved away, biased actions taken during her tenure on the Architectural Review Committee, incidents previously dismissed as mere eccentricity, unpleasantness, or neighborhood crankiness, but now viewed retrospectively through a far more sinister, clarifying light. Willow Creek Preserve's carefully maintained facade of quiet, affluent, harmonious perfection shattered in the bright morning sun, revealing the ugliness festering just beneath the surface. Armed with the undeniable video evidence and the initial statement from the victim, Officer Kelly and his partner, Officer Jennings, walked across the street and approached Margaret Sanderson's front door. The midday sun glinted off their badges as they ascended her pristine walkway. Officer Kelly rang the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened and Margaret Sanderson appeared. Initially, her expression was one of polite, slightly guarded inquiry, perhaps expecting a solicitor or a delivery. When she saw the uniformed officers standing on her porch, her composure shifted slightly, but she maintained an air of haughty confidence. "Yes. Officers, can I help you?" she asked, her tone carrying a hint of impatience, as if their presence were an imposition. "Ma'am. My name is Officer Kelly. This is Officer Jennings," Kelly began formally. "We're investigating a report of vandalism that occurred early this morning at residence directly across the street, owned by Mr. David Martin." "Vandalism?" Margaret scoffed, folding her arms across her chest, her expression hardening into one of disdain. "Perhaps they should look at their own lawn. It's a complete eyesore, an absolute disgrace, completely inappropriate for a neighborhood of this caliber." She gestured dismissively towards the Martins' house. All those strange, messy weeds and ugly rocks. It's just too ethnic. It brings down the entire aesthetic. Officer Kelly remained patient, professional. Ma'am, we have reason to believe you may have information about this incident. Specifically, we have evidence related to the damage caused to Mr. Martin's lawn. He paused, letting the implication hang. Evidence? Margaret repeated, a flicker of unease finally entering her eyes, though her defiant posture remained. Yes, ma'am. Officer Kelly pressed calmly but firmly. We have security camera footage showing an individual matching your description, pouring a liquid substance onto Mr. Martin's lawn shortly after 2 a.m. this morning. Margaret paled visibly beneath her carefully applied makeup, but she didn't immediately crumble. Instead, arrogance, perhaps fueled by years of unchecked privilege and perceived immunity within her HOA domain, seemed to override basic caution. She doubled down. So what if I did? She snapped defensively, her voice rising. Perhaps I did pour something. I was performing a community service, improving the neighborhood, trying to get rid of the ugly, inappropriate, ethnic mess she calls landscaping. Someone had to finally do something about it. Her eyes flashed with righteous indignation. People like him, people like that, they don't belong here. They don't understand our standards. They're bringing down our property values with their different ways. The ugly prejudice was raw now, unveiled, spilling out in her agitation. Officer Kelly cut her off sharply, his voice losing its patient edge, replaced now by stern authority. Ma'am, let me be perfectly clear. Are you admitting, right now, to intentionally pouring bleach or another damaging substance onto your neighbor's private property specifically because you objected to his race or his landscaping style? I'm admitting to tidying up, Margaret insisted stubbornly, perhaps genuinely oblivious to the legal precipice she stood upon, the self-incriminating hole she was digging deeper with every word, or perhaps simply unable to stop herself. He should be thanking me. It was an improvement. Then, with breathtaking arrogance and a staggering lack of awareness, she added, maybe you should be talking to the district attorney's office. Tell them about the kind of element that's moving into Willow Creek. They need to be aware of these things. Officer Kelly exchanged a long, significant look with Officer Jennings. He took a slow, deep breath, the kind police officers take before delivering life-altering news. Ma'am, he said, his voice quiet now, but carrying immense weight. The owner of that property across the street, the victim of this vandalism you've just described, Mr. David Martin? He paused, ensuring he had her full, undivided attention. He is the district attorney for this county. The color drained completely, instantly, from Margaret Sanderson's face. Her jaw literally dropped. Her eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated panic. The smug defiance, the righteous indignation, the arrogant certainty, it all vanished in a single, horrifying moment of realization. The ground had just opened up beneath her feet. She hadn't just vandalized a neighbor's lawn out of petty spite. She had committed a serious crime, motivated by racial hatred, against the county's chief law enforcement officer, and she had just confessed her actions, her motive, her bigotry, directly to the police officers standing on her porch. Based on the unambiguous, high-definition video evidence capturing the act itself, combined with Margaret's own detailed, incriminating statements, confirming her actions, and revealing her explicitly racial motive, Officer Kelly and Officer Jennings had more than sufficient probable cause. Margaret Sanderson, Officer Kelly stated formally, shifting into the procedural language of arrest. You are under arrest for felony vandalism and potentially other charges pending review by the prosecutor's office. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. Margaret began to sob then, incoherent protests mixing with pleas. Her arrogance replaced by raw terror, as the officers professionally, calmly escorted a now weeping and stumbling Margaret Sanderson from her perfect porch towards the waiting patrol car in handcuffs. A crowd of neighbors lined the sidewalks, many holding up their smartphones, recording the ignominious scene. Just then, as if on cue, 2 local news trucks, likely tipped off by outraged residents, monitoring police scanners or alerted automatically due to the district attorney's home address being involved in a police response, rounded the corner. Their cameras were rolling just in time to capture the perp walk, Margaret Sanderson, HOA enforcer, being placed into the back of a police car, her face buried in her hands, the picture of suburban self-destruction. The story didn't just break, it exploded. DAs, lawn attacked with bleach in racist hate crime, screamed the initial online headlines, quickly followed by network news banners. The crystal clear security footage of Margaret, ghost-like in the infrared night, methodically pouring bleach onto the Martin family's lawn, went viral globally within hours. It was stark, undeniable, chilling. This footage was inevitably juxtaposed in news reports and endless social media loops, with the footage captured by neighbors and news crews. Hours later, Margaret, tearful, disheveled, being placed into the back of a police car, her earlier arrogance completely stripped away. News channels played damning clips of Officer Kelly's body cam footage, released later by the department capturing her attempted justification. Too ethnic. People like him don't belong here. Her own words became the damning evidence broadcast worldwide. The incident ignited a firestorm. It became an instant flashpoint, dominating news cycles and social media feeds for days, sparking furious national and international debate about systemic racism persisting even in affluent, seemingly progressive suburban communities. The insidious ways prejudice can manifest, the often inadequate nature of existing hate crime legislation, and the disturbing trend of neighborhood aesthetics and HOA rules being weaponized to enforce racial homogeneity or target minorities. Margaret Sanderson became the unwilling face of modern suburban racism, recognizing the inherent, unavoidable conflict of interest. David Martin's case was immediately, formally transferred from his own district attorney's office to the state attorney general's office for handling. This ensured impartiality and public confidence in the process. The attorney general, keenly aware of the intense public scrutiny and the gravity of the offense, assigned a top special prosecutor from the Civil Rights Division, publicly emphasizing the state's unwavering commitment to vigorously investigating and prosecuting hate crimes, especially one involving a high-profile public official targeted at his own home because of his race. Margaret Sanderson was formally charged with felony vandalism, elevated significantly by a hate crime enhancement under the state statute, an enhancement triggered by the clear evidence of racial motivation, carrying substantially steeper penalties than standard vandalism. Prosecutors also explored additional charges related to potential civil rights violations under state law. The evidence marshaled against Margaret was overwhelming. A prosecutor's dream, the high-definition video capturing the crime in progress, her own detailed confession to the responding police officers, explicitly admitting the act and revealing her racial motive, The chemical analysis confirming bleach as the substance used to damage the lawn, and now, sworn testimony from numerous neighbors detailing her documented history of prejudiced remarks and biased behavior, establishing a clear pattern. Her defense team, facing an almost insurmountable wall of evidence, attempted various damage control strategies. They explored arguments related to diminished mental capacity, suggesting perhaps undiagnosed issues or extreme stress clouded her judgment. They tried claiming her words ethnic. People like him were taken out of context or represented poor phrasing rather than deep-seated racial animus. They floated the idea of a plea bargain involving restitution and counseling, hoping to avoid prison time. But the visual evidence of the calculated night-timey attack, combined with her own damning statements captured on body cam, rendered these defenses largely ineffective and unpersuasive. The special prosecutor refused any plea deal that didn't involve significant felony consequences. The trial, when it eventually commenced after months off pretrial motions, was a media circus. Protesters representing civil rights organizations and anti-racism groups gathered daily outside the courthouse, demanding justice and systemic change. Counter-protesters, though smaller in number, occasionally appeared, defending Margaret or decrying what they called political correctness run amok. News vans lined the streets. Courtroom artists sketched furiously. In Sadith courtroom, the atmosphere was tense, charged. The prosecution meticulously, calmly laid out the case. They presented the chilling security video on large screens for the jury to see. They introduced the forensic evidence, the chemical analysis of the damaged turf samples. They called Officer Kelly and Officer Jennings to testify about the initial call, Margaret's confession, and her demeanor. They presented testimony from several of the Martins' neighbors, who recounted, often reluctantly but firmly, Margaret's history of biased remarks and actions targeting not only the Martins but other minority families who had previously lived in Willow Creek. The emotional core of the trial came with the testimony of the victims. David Martin took the stand, not in his powerful capacity as district attorney, but simply as David Martin, homeowner, husband, father, victim of a hate crime. He calmly, factually recounted the history of Margaret's escalating harassment, the discovery of the damage, and the impact of the incident. He spoke about the violation of his family's sense of safety and belonging in their own home, his quiet dignity, his controlled emotion, his professional demeanor, even while describing a deeply personal attack, stood in powerful, stark contrast to the ugliness of Margaret's actions. Simone Martin also testified, her voice occasionally trembling with emotion but her gaze steady. She described the impact on their children, the fear instilled, the difficult conversations they had been forced to have about racism and hatred. She spoke about the feeling of being targeted, watched, judged, simply because of the color of their skin, in a neighborhood they had chosen for its schools and perceived safety. Her testimony about the violation of their home, their sanctuary, resonated deeply with the jury and the courtroom observers. Margaret Sanderson did not testify in her own defense. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning their verdict, guilty, on all counts, including the crucial hate crime enhancement. At the sentencing hearing several weeks later, the judge, known for her thoughtful but firm approach, delivered a scathing rebuke before imposing sentence. She looked directly at Margaret Sanderson. Miss Sanderson, the judge began, her voice ringing with quiet authority in the packed courtroom. Your actions were not merely vandalism. They were not a misguided attempt at tidying up or enforcing neighborhood aesthetics, as your defense has suggested. They were a despicable act of racial hatred, an act intended to intimidate, to wound, to drive a family from their home based solely on the color of their skin. The judge continued, her words carrying weight. Acts like these tear at the very fabric of our community, eroding trust, fostering fear, and denying fellow citizens their fundamental right to live peacefully and securely, free from harassment and discrimination. This court must and will send an unequivocal message that hate crimes in any form will not be tolerated in this county or this state, citing the calculated, premeditated nature of the nighttime attack, the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence of racial animus as the primary motive, the vulnerability of targeting a family at their home, and acknowledging the unique position of the victim as the county's chief law enforcement officer, though emphasizing the crime would be equally heinous regardless of the victim's profession. The judge sentenced Margaret Sanderson to 5 years in state prison. This sentence significantly exceeded the standard minimum guidelines for felony vandalism, directly reflecting the gravity added by the hate crime conviction. In addition to the prison term, the judge imposed the maximum possible fines allowed under the statutes and ordered Margaret to pay full, documented restitution to the Martin family, forth extensive, costly professional lawn restoration required to repair the chemical damage. The sentence was widely hailed by civil rights groups, community leaders, and many members of the public as a just and necessary outcome. It sent a powerful signal that racially motivated property crimes would be treated with the seriousness they deserved. The high-profile nature of the case, particularly the clear hate crime conviction involving the district attorney, also spurred tangible action in the state legislature. Lawmakers, referencing the Willow Creek incident frequently during debates, introduced and successfully fast-tracked bipartisan legislation, colloquially dubbed David's Law. This new law significantly strengthened penalties for hate crimes across the board, particularly those involving property damage motivated by bias. It also mandated improved, standardized training protocols for law enforcement officers statewide on identifying, investigating, and documenting potential hate crime indicators, aiming to ensure that such crimes were more consistently recognized and prosecuted effectively. For Margaret Sanderson, the consequences were swift and absolute. Her felony conviction meant automatic, permanent removal from the Willow Creek HOA board, a formality, as she had been ostracized long before, and, more significantly, guaranteed residency in a state prison facility for the next several years. Her husband, publicly humiliated and privately devastated by her actions and conviction, finalized their divorce during the trial proceedings. Her meticulously maintained home in Willow Creek Preserve, the symbol of her former status and the launching pad for her reign of petty tyranny, was sold under court order to begin covering the enormous fines, the substantial restitution payments owed to the Martins, and the significant civil damages awarded to the Martin family in a separate lawsuit they pursued and won, seeking compensation for emotional distress, property damage, and punitive damages. Margaret Sanderson lost everything: her standing in the community she claimed to cherish, her carefully accumulated wealth, her marriage, her freedom. She became, permanently, an ignominious national symbol of suburban racism exposed. Her name a cautionary tale whispered in HOA meetings across the country. Willow Creek Preserve, the neighborhood itself, began a long, often uncomfortable, but necessary process of self-examination and attempted healing. The HOA, under entirely new leadership composed of residents committed to change, actively worked to implement the promised reforms. They revised bylaws, hosted community forums on diversity and inclusion, and partnered with local organizations to promote better understanding and communication among residents from different backgrounds. Neighbors formed a grassroots Willow Creek United group, organizing multicultural potlucks, book clubs discussing race and bias, and neighborhood watch programs focused on inclusivity rather than exclusion. The journey was ongoing, imperfect, but the intent was genuine. David Martin and his family slowly, resiliently healed. The damaged section of their front lawn was professionally excavated, the contaminated soil removed, and new, healthy sod and plantings were installed. Over time, the restored area blended seamlessly back into the vibrant, unique, living landscape David had originally designed and nurtured. It remained beautiful, different, a quiet but powerful testament to their endurance, their refusal to be driven out or diminished by hate. David continued his demanding work as district attorney, his resolve to fight for justice, particularly for victims of bias, prejudice, and hate crimes, undeniably deepened and informed by his own family's harrowing experience. The bleach scars on his lawn eventually faded completely from view, erased by time and careful cultivation. But the incident left an indelible mark on his family, on the community, and arguably on the state's legal landscape. A harsh, painful lesson learned about the insidious poison of prejudice hiding in plain sight, and the enduring strength found in standing united against it. One sun-drenched Saturday afternoon, almost a year later, David stood grilling in his backyard once more. The air smelled of barbecue and blooming jasmine. Simone sat nearby, reading, occasionally glancing up to watch their children. Maya, now 11, and her younger brother, Leo, were running across the restored front lawn, laughing, chasing iridescent soap bubbles that floated and danced in the golden light, catching the sun like tiny, fleeting rainbows before popping against the resilient green. David watched them, a deep, quiet sense of peace settling over him, a peace hard-won and fiercely protected. The laughter of his children, echoing freely in the place they called home, was the only sound that truly mattered now. It was the sound of resilience. It was the sound of hope. It was the sound of belonging.